All right, so let's get this show on the road. Again, good afternoon, everyone. A couple of housekeeping items. Participants, as you can see, this is a webinar session. So please utilize the chat box or the Q&A box for any questions that you may have. Put those in there. We'll be happy to address those towards the end of the session. They may be answered along the way. So if not, please pose the question again and we'll get to it. You may also raise your hand and I will happily unmute you and you can ask your question in that way as well. We want to make this a very interactive session, so we want you to be part of it as well. So please put those questions in the chat box for us and we'll answer them. We also want to make sure that you are looking at the presenters. So just make sure that you have the view speaker screen, and I think that should be it. So welcome to our Resume Building Lunch and Learn. My name is Yubi Aranda Sandoval, and I am an Assistant Director in the Office of Alumni Engagement. It is my pleasure to introduce you to our guest speaker, Justin Golding. Justin is an Assistant Director and Career Coach and also serves as a coordinator for the PCA program at UNCG. He is an alumnus of UNCG Counseling and Education Development Master's Program and also an alumnus of Appalachian State University, where he studied political science with a criminal justice minor. Justin loves working one-on-one with students and helping them find their passion and help create long-term career goals. He is also skilled in helping students prepare for interviews and articulating their strengths. Justin is both MBTI and Strong Interest Inventory certified. So welcome, Justin. Thank you for being here. It's a pleasure to have you once again in our Lunch and Learn session.
Well, thank you so much, Yubi. I appreciate it. I just wanted to say hello to everyone out there. It's a pleasure to be speaking with you today. I love working with both current students, and I also love working with alumni. So it's always a privilege to be able to be invited to come speak to alumni. Hope everyone's having a great day. And I'm going to share my screen so that you can see the slides. And let me do this. So today I'm going to be talking about crafting a great resume. And there's a lot of things that go into crafting a resume, but before we do that, I did want to talk about some of the services that we provide to alumni, such as yourself. So I hope that everyone is connected to Handshake. Handshake is one of my favorite platforms for looking for full-time employment or looking for different types of job opportunities. If you've graduated 2018 or later, you should have had your student account be transitioned to an alumnus account. But if you graduated before 2018, we are more than happy to sign you up for a Handshake account. At the end of the presentation, I'll talk a little bit about that and how you would go through the process of getting a profile, but we are more than happy to get that set up for you. But I did want to talk about some of the services that we provide to alumni, such as yourselves. You can actually go through handshake.uncg.edu and you can schedule a virtual, in-person, or a telephone appointment for us to talk with you about your career goals, whether you're looking to transition from one career to another, whether you are looking to go back to school for a graduate school, or whether you are looking at applying for a promotion, whether you are looking at some professional development opportunities. So we're more than happy to take a look at your resume or cover letter, more than happy to facilitate a mock interview. And another great thing that we provide, as alumnus, you are actually all able to attend our fall and spring career fairs. I'll be completely honest, we do not do a good enough job telling alumnus that, but as an alumnus, you are more than welcome to attend our fall and our spring career fairs. So if you're looking for opportunities, you can actually go on Handshake, look at our different events, and you can see a list of the employers who are going to be there, what type of opportunities or full-time jobs that they are looking to hire for, and also what specific type of majors, if they are major specific opportunities, but that is all available on handshake.uncg.edu. And if you are looking to put that on your calendar, our next full-time career fair will be September 29th. So we're super excited about that. And we also help with LinkedIn profiles or LinkedIn reviews. So definitely I invite everybody to attend some of our career fair events, both in the fall and the spring. So when thinking about what is a resume, a lot of times this is going to be your first impression when you are working with an employer or when you are applying for a specific position. So this is a first impression, and you are wanting to showcase to an employer who you are, what you bring to the table as a potential employee, as a potential member of that team or organization. So you're showing what you bring to the table. And one of the big questions that we always get here at Career and Professional Development is, how long should my resume be? And that's a great question. And sometimes that can depend specifically on your level of education. So one of my old colleagues, Brittany, she mentioned that a good rule of thumb is thinking about a page per degree. So let's say, for instance, if you are someone who got your PhD here at the university, your resume or CV may be longer. It may be 3 pages long. Whereas if you received your master's degree, it might be 2 pages. Or if you just recently graduated with your bachelor's, or you graduated with your bachelor's, a little ways ago, that might be a 1-page resume. So a lot of times it depends on your level of experience, and it could also depend on your level of education. So a good rule of thumb is thinking about a page per degree. But when you are showcasing some of that experience on your resume, you want to make sure that it is tailored specifically for the employer. So, and we'll talk about this in a couple of slides, but when you're talking about your past work experiences or your current work experiences, tell the employer how that, or showcase to the employer that correlation. Use their terminology. When you are looking at a job description, highlight some of the key words and phrases that they are looking for in a candidate and try to incorporate that terminology into either your current job or your past job. So a resume is a representation of your attention to detail. One of the biggest things that can be a turnoff to an employer is if there's a misspelling, or if you're using the wrong word, or spell check did not catch something. So make sure that you're paying close attention to your resume. This is literally the first document that they are going to read. So make sure everything is spelled correctly. And a good thing to remember, the resume, this is a key, or this is a stepping stone to gain an interview. So this is just one part of the process. If you submit your resume and they like it, if they're asking for a cover letter and they like it, then this is the key for you to get an interview with the employer, the person that you are applying to. So remember that this is a key stepping stone to getting that interview. Now, right here is your traditional resume. This is, it's going to include some of the things that we're going to talk about today. And I will say this is a little bit more of an interactive part. So in a second, you'll use the Q&A to talk about some of the things that you saw. But I just want you to take a couple seconds to take a look at this resume. Okay. So after taking a look at that resume for about 6-7 seconds, using the Q&A feature, what are some of the things that you noticed in the resume? Okay, so it looks uniformed. I see education is first. Okay, and let me go back. The main reason I took the resume off was that most employers may look at a resume for 6 seconds, 7 seconds, 15 seconds. But I wanted to see, your first impressions of this resume. What are some of the things that you see? Okay. And I might not be able to see the Q&A UB, but I see there's one comment there. Oh, my apologies, I do see it.
It says GPA, nothing significant stood out, one of our guests says, and then there's a lot to read at once.
Okay, perfect.
A new worker.
Okay. Yeah, and y'all are absolutely right. This is a lot of information. So we see a lot of education because it looks like this is a fairly new graduate. I see it's typed with text. So I also see everything blends together. So when thinking about that, you going back to the idea that your resume is your first impression, you want to make sure that you're making good use of your spacing. You want to make sure that there's a line of white space between each section. And you also, going back to the comment that everything looks uniformed, you want to make sure that everything is consistent. So if you italicize your current job title, you want to make sure that all your job titles are italicized. If you bold a specific place of employment, make sure all of those places are bolded. Let's see. So there's a lot to read. So, going back to the comment, education is first. Was anybody looking at the education first, or was anybody looking at the work experience first? Where was your eyes drawn to first? And maybe a better way of asking that is, if I was to ask you, what is a detail that you see on here? What's a detail that really comes across? Okay, so I see the middle you saw first. Internship experience mostly. Excellent. I see somebody put name and format of the resume. So your contact information is always going to be first, because this is going to be the way the employer is going to contact you. So your name's always going to be bigger. That's going to be the only inconsistency, is your name's always going to be bigger, anywhere from 14 to 20 point font. If for no other reason that when an employer has your resume in front of them during an interview, they see your name first thing. And then also your email address and your telephone number, so that they have an easy way of contacting you. So some people said the middle portion, the internship experience, really captured their attention. But as you can see, this is a lot of information. There's a lot of information here. So you want to make sure that during those 6 seconds, 15 seconds, however long the employer is looking at it, that they are seeing the main things you want to highlight. And I see another comment. So I don't see a robust work experience. So depending on where you are in your career, where you are in your stage of life, you may have various levels of work experience. So if this was a recent person that maybe graduated, let's say, May 2020, they may talk about some of their more academic experiences. Let's say if they're a Ryan's school student, they may include more of their academic work experience, or some of their internship experience if they are just getting started in their work experience. And in a second, I'll talk a little bit about the difference between a traditional resume and a functional resume, because if you're someone that's been out of the workforce for about 10 years, a functional resume may be more beneficial. But you're absolutely right. You could talk about your professional experience. Some people talk about their community experience. Some people include their skills. If you are a computer science person that is going into that field, a lot of times employers like to see your skills and your coding skills specifically as one of the first things on your resume. So depending on the field that you're going into, depending on where you are in your life, you may reorganize your resume depending on what you're applying to. So as I said, typically 10 to 15 seconds. So you want to make sure those 10 to 15 seconds count. You want to make sure that the employer gravitates towards the information that you want to highlight, that you want to put a spotlight on, so that they are getting the information that they need to consider you for this candidacy, to consider you for an interview. Now, the typical ingredients of a resume is you're always going to have your educational background on there, in addition to your contact information. And you're always going to have your experience or your work experience section. Could be work, volunteer, leadership. You're always going to have a skills and abilities section. And this is where you really want to focus on your hard skills. Now, your hard skills is where you're talking about specific technology that you know, where that might be something as simple as Microsoft Word, or whether it might be something more industry specific. Skills and abilities is also a good place to put your certifications. So I, a couple years ago, took the national counseling exam. So am certified as national, or I have my NCC, which is my national counseling certification. So I would put that with my skills and abilities. And also you can include your accomplishments. So whether that's something like study abroad, which we see right here is included in their education section, whether it's a specific scholarship, whether it might even be an employee of the month, employee of the year at your current workplace. But you would definitely want to talk about your accomplishments. And another key thing to talk about, and this is what a lot of people, a lot of alumnus, a lot of current students that they forget to include in their resume, when you're talking about your work experience, showcase the positive impact that you had in your current job or your past job. So whether you took initiative and you created something, whether you are managing people, whether you're evaluating the success of something, talk about your positive impact on a current company or a past company. 3 essential ingredients: contact information, education, and some form of experience. Now, the basic rules, and we've actually had employers from the past. I know one of our colleagues, friends over at Lincoln Financial, Zach Yarborough, he gave a Q&A last year during summer 2020, and this was one of his key rules. Avoid templates. Because a lot of times when you're using a template, I know that they can sometimes be helpful, but a lot of templates out there, they have bad space usage. A lot of them have really wonky colors. Like I've seen one that's like lime green. I've seen one that's orange. So a lot of them can have, really light colors that may not show up well on a employer's computer. And a lot of times when someone is using a template, they don't have autonomy over the resume. So what I mean by that is your resume is a lifelong document. You're constantly updating your resume. You're putting new jobs on there. If you decide to go back to school for either a second degree or for graduate school, you're going to be updating your education. When you're using a template, you're kind of at the mercy of the people who created the template, where you're including the information that basically you are using their preset box. You're using the font that they chose. So you don't have autonomy over the document. You can't make changes to it. You can't reformat it. So you want to make sure that you are creating a resume from scratch. And we actually have some examples. I'll be more than happy to send an email with some formatting resumes that we have to help you out. But you want to make sure you have standardized categories. You want to make sure that everything is consistent, because a lot of times the resume is going to go through what we call an ATS tracking system. And basically what that is that human resources is making sure you're qualified for the job before you're submitted to the hiring manager. And a lot of times, if you're using a template, this can throw the ATS tracking system off. And even though you are qualified for the position, you may not even be considered for it. So avoid templates. They can be a hassle. They're really hard. Sometimes they're really hard to navigate. Sometimes they may have colors that don't make sense. But make sure you are creating a resume from scratch. And in this case, conservative is probably, or more traditional is probably the best way to go. The only time that you would really use color on a resume is if you're applying for like an interior design position, an interior architect position, or a graphic design position, where your resume is showcasing your skills in action. More often than not, if you're applying for business, education, if you're applying for a science-related position or a hospital position, the traditional black and white resume is the way to go. And as we mentioned, brief is best, 1 to 2 pages max. Preferred 1 page, especially if you are a fairly recent graduate. Good rule of thumb, 1 page per degree. Also, you want to avoid personal pronouns just because they can become really repetitive. If I'm saying that I spoke with, I did this, I did that, it's going to become really repetitive. Also, we want to start each bullet point with a strong action verb. We want to capture the employer's attention. We want to show how you were able to manage, supervise, how you were able to take initiative. So we want it to be as professional as possible. So avoiding personal pronouns and provide concrete details. Let's say, for instance, if you're involved in philanthropy, it's much more impactful to say that you raised $1,000 than to just say that you raised money at the March of Dimes. It's much more impactful to have a number. to say that I manage 25 plus people. I worked with 200 plus customers on a daily basis. I raised $10,000 for a local charity. It's much more impactful to have that concrete information. And in addition to that, to provide the context. So if you're raising money, who are you raising money for? Is it March of Dimes? Is it a local organization? Were you doing it through a professional organization? What was the name of that professional organization? So provide that concrete detail. Make sure you're providing context so that the employer knows the impact, the positive results of your work. Also, you want to make sure that you're prioritizing the information and you're using bullet points for content. No paragraphs, no wall of text, because as we even saw with the example that we used a while ago, there's a lot of people who mentioned specifically that resume, it was still overwhelming. Even though it had bullet points, there was a lot of information on there. So we want to make sure that we're doing everything we can to make the resume as easy to read as possible. So I saw a really good question. So should you list scholarships under education or somewhere else? So my personal opinion is that I would list it under the education, just because you're able to showcase whether you're a McNair scholar, whatever that may look like. You can put the scholarship, and an employer will understand that you were that was an award that you had throughout your college time period. You can even include the years that scholarship was active. So I would include that with your education. Now, if you have a CV and you have an awards section, you could also include the scholarship there. But I personally would recommend scholarships with education, just because there's a nice flow to it. You have that piece of information there. And then I also see the question, how important is your GPA? Does it make a difference? So that's also a really great question. And I think when it comes to GPA, I think that it's important to remember that hiring managers are just like anyone else. They're going to view different pieces of information with various level of importance. There's going to be some hiring managers that probably graduate with a 2.5, and for them, GPA might not be as important as some of the other hiring managers. GPA would be included on your resume if it's above a 3.0. So if you have above a 3.0, I would include the GPA, just because that is something that can showcase your academic history here at the university. But you just have to remember, I mean, we've had hiring managers, and this was a great recruiter or hiring manager, but they mentioned to the students that their freshman year, sophomore year, it took them a little bit of time to really get acquainted with the university. So hiring managers are human just like us. There may be some hiring managers that are really impressed if you have a high GPA. There may be some hiring managers who they themselves struggled academically, and they may be more interested in your work experience. They may want to know more about your tactile, hands-on experience, your practicum experiences, so that they have that information. Let's see. So I also see a comment, start from scratch. Is it better to use Microsoft Office? You've used Canva before, but you're guessing this would not be a good to use now. So I would stay away from Canva. As I mentioned before, the only time that I would use a design like that is for interior architecture, for graphic design, for something that's going to be a little bit more creative of an industry. And that is a really great question, because I personally use Microsoft Office, Microsoft Word, just because there's a lot of great formatting features that you can utilize for creating your subheadings, for really making your resume look professional. Now, I know some students have also used Google Documents, but for me, utilizing Microsoft Office, there's just a lot of great features, especially using the underline feature when creating your subheadings, making sure that everything is consistent, making sure that everything is spelled correctly. I am a big personal fan of Microsoft Office, but I would stay away from Canva just because I would go with that more traditional black and white resume for an employer. The only time that you would use a more creative resume, interior architecture, graphic design. And then what is the best spacing between lines? So you want to have one line of white space between each section. And usually for the margins, you would have anywhere from 0.5 to 1 inch margins. So the best spacing between each section would be 1 line of white space between each section, and making sure that everything is consistent throughout the resume. Let's see. Yeah, so just making sure that everything is consistent. Also, making sure your margins are consistent and making sure your font throughout is consistent. Sometimes people will have their subheadings larger than the information within their resume. You want that to be consistent also. The only thing that's going to be different is names going to be anywhere from 14 to 20 point font. Everything else will be a consistent 10 to 12 point font. Okay, great questions. Keep them coming. Now, this right here is more of a traditional layout. You have everything listed in reverse chronological order because employers want to see your most recent work first. They want to know what you've done this year first before they see what you've done 5 years ago. And another question that we often get here at Career and Professional Development, how far should we go back when we're talking about our history? And usually I think that about 5 to 7 years, that usually is the sweet spot, or when you're thinking about your different types of work activities, that's usually when I would recommend thinking about taking some information off your resume, is that after that 7-year time period, especially if you haven't worked at a company in 7 years. Ideally, you would be progressing in your career, or you would have made a career transition where you could talk about some of the things that you did in that place of employment in your most recent job experiences or work experiences. But you want to make sure that you're including the most important information first and then going backwards from there. Now, a lot of times I often recommend education coming right after your contact information. That's not a hard, set in stone rule, but especially if you graduated within the past 3 years, especially, I would have education come first, just because you can showcase to the employer what your major was. You can showcase your GPA if you decide to include your GPA on your resume. And then you can go to your work experience. You can include your internship experience, community service or professional, any type of professional networking experience. That could be a great thing to include on your resume, especially as we mentioned before, if you're raising money, if you're taking part in event planning, if you're doing any type of project management, that could be a great thing to include on your resume. And then I usually like to end with my skills section, just because it's a strong section that you can end on. But you can talk about any secondary languages that you have, and American Sign Language could also be included in that. And then you could talk about secondary languages, technology skills, certifications. So that's a great section that's easy for the employer to read because it's more of a list format, but you can end strongly with that section. And then I see a question. So don't have job titles larger than the information under the position. That is correct. You want to be consistent in the sizing of the font, the information. Yeah, you want to be consistent in size. Great question. And then can you start with a summary of your experience before education? So you can start with a summary of your experience before education, most definitely. And with your summary of qualifications, a good thing to start out with that, especially if you have numerous years of work experience, you could start out by saying 10 plus years of experience in progressive customer service, 10 plus years of experience in academia. You could say 5 plus years of experience in a fast-paced corporate environment. But I usually, when you're doing summary qualifications, I like to have them bullet points, and I'd like to start off with the number of years of experience that you have in a particular setting. Just because, as I mentioned before, employers, they understand numbers. That's a key thing that can get you started off on the right foot. But in your summary qualifications, come from a strengths-based perspective. Talk about all the great things. It's almost like a greatest hits. You have 4 bullet points that base in your summary qualifications that tell the employer that these are the most important things that I'm bringing to the table. This is what makes me a really competitive candidate. So that's just something to think about, something to consider. And then, should you include your internship or work experience first for someone who recently graduated? So depending on the industry that you're going into, if your internship is more specific to that industry, let's say, for instance, your internship was with VF Corporation and you are someone who's looking to go into design, I would include your internship experience before I would include your customer service experience working at Kaplan Wellness Center or working at Target or wherever it may have been. Now, that if you have work experience that's not related to that industry, that's still important. But if you have something that's a little bit more industry specific, I would include that first, just so that you can showcase some of the different projects that you were involved in, that you can showcase how you collaborate with your supervisor, how you collaborate with your peers. There's so many great things that you can talk about with your internship, especially if you're someone who took part in the Campus Greensboro Internship Fellowship. That'd be a great thing to talk about specifically in relation to your internship, how you were able to collaborate with people from all the different universities here in the Triad. So if you recently graduated and your internship is more related than your work experience, include your internship experience first. But as you gather more work experience that's more related to the industry that you are going to be progressing in, that you're going into, you would include that first. You just want to make sure, whichever one that you decide, the order of your resume, you just want to make sure that it's appealing to the employer. You're using their terminology to showcase, this is how I'm a great candidate for this job, for this position. And let's see, what if you have a lot of work experience? How many employers should I include in my resume and how far back should I go? So I saw that question from UNCG Alumni. Great question. So that, as I mentioned before, I would probably go back 5 to 7 years. There really isn't a magic number when it comes to employers, but this is actually a great segue to the next type of layout. So this right here is more of a functional resume. And if you're looking on the right side of your computer screen, instead of talking about your work-related activities with each of the different work experiences, they talked about it from the context of professional skills and abilities. So this person right here, over a 12-year time period, they worked at 4 different types of employers. So instead of having different types of responsibilities with each place of employment, they included it right here. And they instead chose to talk about it from the perspective of administrative support, customer service, leadership skills, and technical skills. Now, if you are applying for a job that is going to have each of those key functions or each of those key factors as part of the hiring process, part of the interview process, that's a way that you could showcase several years of experience, whether it's 7+ years of experience, 10+ years of experience. You can include this as a functional resume and still have that one-page resume. So if you wanted to make it more skill specific, if you wanted to make it more specific to the different types of skills, whether it's leadership, customer service, managing skills, this is a great way that you can include that information. But I did want to say, there really is no magic number for how many employers you should include. As I mentioned before, if you are a little bit more experienced, it may be okay to go to a second page just because you're talking about more relevant experience. What's most important is that when you're showcasing your past experience, you're making a direct correlation to the employer. This experience has prepared me for the job I'm applying to. Whether I'm overseeing a budget, whether I'm working with different types of technology, whether I'm supervising people, the experience that I've had before makes me an ideal candidate for the position I'm applying to right now. So functional resumes, you can definitely utilize this format, especially if you have several years of work experience. And this is a great way to still have a one-page resume with numerous years of experience. But there is no magic number for how many employers you should include. Just remember what's most relevant to the employer, and describing the past work experience. Make sure that you're making it relevant for the job that you're applying to. So let's see. So I see a question, how long should you leave retail positions on your resume? So that's a great question. I think that when it comes to retail, there's been several employers who have said that, if you have part-time work experience, full-time work experience, they definitely want to see that, if you were completing that as you were completing your degree. So I think that, the retail positions, as I mentioned before, the 5 to 7 years. So, if you wanted to include that, you can still include that on your resume. Now, what you could do is you could separate your work experience into 2 different sections. You could say, for instance, going back to the example of VF Corporation, if you wanted to say your design work experience, you could have that as one section, and then you could have your customer service experience as another section. If you are applying for a job with the Guilford County School System, you could have education or teaching work experience as one section, and then have your customer service experience in another section. So you can separate it so that one is a little bit more industry specific, and then one is focusing on some of your side projects or some of the different customer service experiences that you've also completed. And then, is a cover letter needed with a resume? A lot of times a cover letter does a great job complementing the resume. And let's say, for instance, if the employer says cover letter optional, then it's not optional. It needs to be included. It needs to be included with your resume, because if you don't submit a cover letter and another candidate submits a cover letter, then automatically you're at a disadvantage. So you want to make sure that you have all the tools in your tool belt needed to get that interview, as we mentioned before. So if it says cover letter optional, it's not optional. Definitely include a cover letter. If an employer is asking for your resume by email, usually it's good to include your cover letter as the body of the email that you're sending to that hiring manager, sending to that recruiter. So that is another thing to consider, another thing to think about. But usually it's good to have a cover letter. I will say there are some hiring managers who have said that it's very important to include a cover letter. Some have said that they really don't look at the cover letter that much, that the resume and interview are more important to them. If you do include a cover letter, same, as I mentioned before with the resume, this is a good first impression for you, for the employer to see your past work experience. So make sure that nothing is misspelled, make sure that everything is grammatically correct. So you just want to make sure that it's written well if you include it. And like I said before, if it says optional, it's not optional, it's required. Let's see. How important is it to customize the cover letter to the job I'm applying for? So that's a great question, and the answer is very important. You want to make sure that you are submitting a different cover letter to every job that you're applying to. So if you're applying to VF Corporation and then applying to Global Brands Group, applying to iSurety, and I'm just using some of the employers that have been to our career fairs. I'm trying to add some nice variety, but I'm trying to also, utilize some of the employers that have come to our past career fairs. But, if you're applying to different positions, make sure that you're writing a different cover letter for each position. Because one of the key things in the first paragraph of the cover letter, you're going to say is why you're passionate about working for that company and why you are uniquely situated for the position that you're applying to. Another good thing to remember, we definitely want to encourage you to spread your wings, spread your net, apply for as many different jobs, opportunities as possible with several different companies. But if you're applying for a specific company, you want to make sure that you're being intentional with the jobs that you're applying to. So if you're applying to the accounting department at that company, but then you're also applying to, let's see, the information technology department of that company, then that's going to, raise some red flags. If you're applying to 2 separate positions that have nothing in common with one another, or, and some employers have told us that people have done this, if you're applying to 20 different positions, you're just applying to everything at the company, that's going to set up some red flags. So be intentional with where you're applying to. Make sure that the position you're applying to is uniquely situated for your skills and your knowledge. And sometimes an employer may contact you for some of the different positions, but and sometimes employers you've applied for a position with with an organization, they may say, based on your experience, you may not be, great for this position right here, but we have another position that's coming up that you may be more uniquely situated for that we encourage you to apply for. So you just want to make sure that you're being intentional Because if you apply for 20 different jobs with a company, it's going to be a red flag. People are going to notice that. So make sure your cover letter is specifically written for that position. Talk about why you're passionate about that company. Talk about why you're applying for that position, that internship, whatever you're applying to, because people notice. People notice passion. They want to know why you want to work there. Why are you the ideal candidate for that position? And right here, this is some of the kind of more information, contact information. So name, address is optional. I know that that can be a safety concern for some individuals, especially if you're applying online. Address is optional if you want to just put Greensboro, NC, or if you want to just put Raleigh, NC, or, if you're living, far away like Los Angeles, CA, put the city and the state, but you don't have to include your physical address. And you can also include your LinkedIn information underneath your contact information, because that would be a great way for the employer to get to see all of your information. So if you have a one-page resume, two-page resume, and you really want to include some other information, LinkedIn is a great place to include that information. Include a link and the contact information, and then that way the employer can see everything once they've looked at your resume. Now, how do you tailor your resume and cover letter for a career change? So that's an excellent question. So usually when you're talking about a career transition or a lateral move, anything along those lines, you would talk about that in your cover letter specifically. So if you're talking about transitioning from one industry to another or changing careers, you might mention specifically in your first paragraph or your second paragraph why you are looking to move on to a new career, move on to a new career opportunity. And a key thing to remember, don't ever disparage a former employer, whether that's in a cover letter, whether that's in the interview. Even if you had a challenging or rough experience with an employer, make sure you still talk, come at it from a strengths-based perspective, positivity, different things like that. But when you're tailoring your resume, tailoring your cover letter for a career change, you can definitely use your cover letter to talk about why you are looking to transition to a career change. And you could even talk about some of your transferable skills. A big thing that employers want to know about is specific examples of your communication skills, your collaboration skills, and your critical thinking skills. How you're able to make decisions in the moment, how you're able to facilitate a team or communicate with your colleagues, work with people on a team. Those are the three big things that can go across many different industries. So, and I'll even include it in the chat feature just because this is a great thing to remember. But the 3 C's, communication, collaboration, critical thinking, these are great things to think about as you are going through your career, as you're looking for new opportunities. Always think about specific examples, because those are transferable skills that can go to any type of industry. But employers want to know context. So cover letter is a great place to explain your career change, different things like that. So what's an example of how the layout of a good cover letter would look like? So I'll actually be happy to showcase or send everyone an example of our cover letter guide, because in addition, it has 3 different examples of what a cover letter would look like. And it also has a great example of what an emailed cover letter would look like, in addition to a cover letter that you would submit to an application. So I'll get everyone's emails from UB, and I'll be happy to email the cover letter guide to everybody so that you have that you can look at in the future. But also the cover letter guide is also available on our website. I wish it was labeled more prominently, but it's under the resume section. And then let's see, what if you're applying to a position that is not in the same state? How do you make it known that you're willing to relocate for this position? So that's a great question. I would actually utilize my cover letter to talk about any type of long distance opportunities or any type of relocating opportunities. I would mention specifically in your cover letter, if you're applying for a job in Denver, if you're applying for a job in Miami, I would state specifically that, you are looking for opportunities in the Miami, Denver area, that you're looking to relocate. And a lot of times you could even include that in your last paragraph of your cover letter, where you are, just kind of providing some of that final finishing, basically the finishing touches on your cover letter. But I would explain, your living situation or your moving situation in your cover letter specifically. And then, and also, to go back to your contact information, if you are applying for a position that's not in the same state, I feel that most employers, they're pretty understanding that more people are, moving to different states. They're looking for long distance career opportunities. But going back to the physical address being optional, if you wanted to just put Denver, CO for Colorado, or if you want to put Miami FL, just put in the city and the state. Or if you have a friend or family member, colleague that you want to put their address down for that, for your contact information, you could definitely do that also. But that's a great question. I know more people are doing long distance opportunities, and also more people are doing remote opportunities. There's several remote opportunities on both Handshake and Career Shift, which is a great website. You do have to pay for Career Shift, unfortunately, but that I've seen several remote opportunities posted on Career Shift in the past year since the pandemic. So that's another thing to think about or consider, is there's several great remote opportunities. And another great question I see, would you include an objective in your resume? So that's a nice segue here. So with the objective, if you include it, you want to make sure that it counts. You want to talk about the position that you are applying for. So you would, if you're applying for a position, whether that's Lincoln Financial, whether that's Guilford County School System, whether that's Cone Hospital, but you would want to state what position in the organization you're applying to, and you'd want to state what are the key qualifications that you bring to the table. So as you see right here in this example, this person's applying for a financial analyst position with VF Corporation using advanced SPSS knowledge and experience with executive presentations to produce results. So they are showcasing to the employer not only the position they're applying to, but also what they are bringing to the table as a candidate. So if you include your objective, make sure it counts. Make sure you are talking about specifically what you bring to the table as a candidate. And I will be honest, there are a lot of career coaches or people in the field who say that you should leave it off. I know that one of my old colleagues, Travis, he was a very big proponent of leaving it off your resume. I'm a little bit more kind of like, it's up to you. Stylistically, it's up to you. But that is a very, very good question. And then I've already talked a little bit about the profile summary. As I mentioned before, including 4 specific things that are almost the greatest hits of what you bring to the table. I like to start off myself, how many years that you've been in the industry or your specific expertise or knowledge. This is also optional. And, if you decide to include it, make it count. That's the most important thing that I can think about, consider when working with profile, working with the summary section. Now, education, if you're a more recent graduate, I would put this close to the top. I would include the full name of your degree. So Bachelor of Science, Bachelor of Arts, Master of Fine Arts, if you're a master's student, or Master of Science. So include the full name of your degree, the full name of the institution, and your location. Make sure you include the graduation date, just so that the employer has that information. And you can include any minors, any concentrations. You can include scholarships, include your GPA if it's above a 3.0, and include any awards such as Chancellor's List, Dean's List. If anybody has studied abroad, that's also another great way to include information. Especially if you're someone who's coming at this from a global perspective. A lot of companies, they have, there's several different companies that have many different locations. I know Biogen, right down in the Research Triangle Park, right down the road from Greensboro, they have several different locations, specifically in Europe, in addition to locations in the United States. So if you have study abroad information, or a secondary language, or you are multilingual, that's a great way to separate yourself from other candidates. So that's another thing to consider. Now, I know that we've got about 9 minutes left, I believe, so I did want to talk about the work experience and formatting that. So a lot of times when you're talking about your work experience, you want to make sure you include the big information, the name of company, your location, what your specific position title was, and then also a description of your work duties, your skills, and your achievements using the bullet point format. And actually, let me go right here. So the way to talk about describing your experience, a lot of people make the mistake of only going with the task-based. So when you're talking to somebody, and we could be at a party introducing ourselves for the first time, and someone asks you, what do you do for work, or what do you do for a living? And you might say something more general like, I was responsible for several fundraising events, I assist with marketing, I serve as a sales associate for fast-paced retail store. So all of this is a good starting point, is what I like to call it. So all of this is important information, but what we want to do when we're describing your experience, we want to make sure that we're providing the fine details. We want to make sure that we are showcasing to an employer, these are some of the things that I really bring to the table that's going to make me a really great addition to your team. So instead of saying that you're responsible for several fundraising events, I would say organize and manage 3 annual campus and community fundraisers totaling $5,000 in donations for charity. This tells us how much money you raised, tells us how many events that you were in charge of, and specifically what your specific role was in that. If you're someone who's applying for a marketing position and you're talking about some of your social media expertise, you could talk about how you developed a marketing campaign that was composed of social media and print advertising for fundraising events in collaboration with the executive board. So they talked about that they collaborated with the executive board. They talked about different types of events that they were in charge of, and even the different ways that they got their message out in the open. A lot of times when I'm working with alumnus, I'm working with current students, they talk about all the great things that they have done, such as presenting to the CEO of a company, talking about building collaborations with community members, or raising vast amounts of money for a specific charity or philanthropic organization. We want to provide these details. And as you can see with the different examples on the right side, this isn't a paragraph. You can still have a lot of great information for your past employment and include it in a 1 sentence or include it at 2 lines max. So you want to make sure that you're providing concrete numbers, that you're providing that context. What was it that I did? What was my importance to the organization? Also, you want to make sure that you use the correct tense. So past tense for anything that you are no longer involved in, present tense if you're still working somewhere. And you want to make sure that you're thinking about the reader. How am I going to get them interested? What's going to appeal to them? Is that going to be my managing skills? Is that going to be my project management skills? Is that going to be my use of technology? What's going to be something that really appeals to this company? So make sure you're speaking to your audience. And I did want to mention the NACE competencies really quickly. Now, NACE, it's an organization that basically gets career and professional development centers like our office and basically in touch with employers. So basically, these are the 8 different things that employers are looking for when they are looking to make hires. So going back to the 3 C's, that communication, collaboration, critical thinking, 3 of these are represented right here in the NACE competencies. And as I mentioned before, if you have any type of study abroad experience, any type of secondary languages that you are either bilingual, trilingual, multilingual in, these are great things to talk about because, if you're talking with an employer and you know how to speak Spanish, you know how to speak Mandarin, you know American Sign Language, this is going to allow that company, organization, nonprofit, whoever you're applying to have access to a new population, a new customer base, a new population that they might not have previously had access to communicate with. So that could be a great, great thing. And I can definitely make the PowerPoint available after the Zoom call. I talked about sending everyone the cover letter guide, but I'm more than happy to send the slides too. Also to everyone that was on the call today, I'm more than happy to send the slides also. because there's a lot of great information here. And when you're thinking about your leadership skills, your digital technology skills, global intercultural fluency, as I mentioned before, provide context, showcase to the employer why this is important. Because when you're speaking with somebody, with an employer, part of your job in applying to different jobs is to explain to the employer in your resume and your cover letter why your past experience is important, why it's prepared you for this position, why it's prepared you for this upcoming job. So when you're advocating for yourself, when you're talking about all the great things you bring to the table, it's up to you to think about ways to speak the employer's terminology, to basically speak to them in a way showcasing to them, I am somebody that would make a great addition to your team. I'm somebody that's bringing skills to the table that you need. And I just want to check for time. I know that we're running late, or basically we're almost at the end of our time together. So I did want to ask, what are some final questions that everyone has, whether it's concerning resumes, whether it's concerning cover letters? What are some things that you have questions about? And while y'all are putting them in the Q&A, I did want to mention specifically registering for Handshake. Go to handshake.uncg.edu. And if you graduated before spring 2018, you can definitely request an account. Our technology people will usually be able to get you an account set up with a turnaround day, probably about 2 business days, for them to go in, set up the account, different things like that. But you can easily request an account through our website, handshake.uncg.edu. And we are more than happy to get that started. You're going to include your name, graduation year, major, and put in your current email address so that, once the profile is activated, it will send a link to your email address so that you can activate it. So be on the lookout for that. And also, this is just some information about Handshake. I personally love Handshake. I've seen a lot of great job positions posted on there. There's 400,000 plus employers. Several of them are Fortune 500 companies, different things like that. But this is a great opportunity for people to really look for different types of opportunities. And as I mentioned before, there's several employers who are searching for people for remote opportunities. And our fall career fair that I mentioned specifically, it's going to be virtual in the fall. So you will access that virtual career fair through Handshake. And as alumnus, you are more than welcome to attend our fall career fair, our spring career fair. And fingers crossed, my hope is that, we're past the worst of the pandemic, but we're keeping an eye on everything and how everything's developing. But my hope is that spring we're able to be in person again, but we will be virtual for the fall, so that will be easy access. And there will be a list of employers as they register for the career fair on Handshake. And is LinkedIn really that necessary in the current job application environment? I think that LinkedIn is more necessary for networking. Because a lot of times when you're applying for a job and the employer is looking for information about you, because employers, they do Google people. Like I've had several types of jobs I've applied for in the past where employers have specifically looked at my LinkedIn profile to learn more about me. So I think that LinkedIn is really more necessary for showcasing your professional image to the world around you. Also, I know that we have a very robust alumni group on LinkedIn. We have a great UNC Greensboro group on LinkedIn. So networking with your fellow alumni, networking with our wonderful staff at Alumni Engagement, networking with Career and Professional Development, that's where LinkedIn, its strengths really come to the table. Because networking works. We know networking works. We've had employers point blank mention that, a lot of times some of their job postings, we've had employers mention specifically that, a lot of job postings, they will mention to people at different conferences, or they'll talk about in their professional circle. I know our friends down at Duke, they are currently looking for a career coach, and they put on the LinkedIn profile, please forward this to any interested parties. So networking is important. Putting yourself out there, talking about looking for specific type of work and specific type of industry, it gets results. So why LinkedIn is necessary. That's why LinkedIn is important for you networking and putting yourself out there, explaining to the world around you what your professional status is, all the great things you bring to the table, and connecting with like-minded people. And I'm seeing the slides, but there's also some industry-specific search websites, so that we also have that right there.
These are great questions that are coming through. Thank you all for posing these questions and having the time to be here and feel comfortable enough to pose these questions to us. And if there is any way that we can connect you with other alum and network with them regarding possible opportunities, you are welcome to reach out to our office. Like Justin mentioned, where I would send you is really our LinkedIn page. LinkedIn has really helped some of our alum find other alumni working in a particular industry and really connect with them and either ask questions about the company or ask questions about the industry to see if that's something that they are wanting to pursue. So utilizing all the resources that you have, LinkedIn, our Facebook networking groups are great ways to connect with other alum. And again, I can't stress enough, Handshake. There have been career opportunities on there that are entry level, but also advanced. And not many advanced, I will disclose that, but there are still opportunities there. So I would also explore that avenue if you are looking for a career opportunity. But I think we have come to our time together. I just want to remind everyone there are some upcoming networking events that you are welcome to attend. We have July 27th, our Spartan Sip with UNCG Athletics at Natty Greens. This is a great opportunity, one, to get to know our coach, our new coach, Mike Jones, and two, to network with other young alum. So I hope that you can make it out next week, July 27th. And then there's a second Spartan Sip, and this one will be in Charlotte, July 29th. If you are looking to move in that direction or are in that region, you are welcome to attend our event there. We will have career coaching sessions next week. I know that those are filled, but utilize Handshake to schedule a appointment with one of the coaches at a CPD office. They will accommodate a time for you, so you can do that through Handshake. We just have these particular career days for our alum that we just book out for one solid day, and we like to give that opportunity to them. But please reach out to our CPD office and sign up through Handshake, and you can schedule something there. Yes, all material will be shared with you guys. We will send the recording and the material that Justin had for us, and that will be sent out via email. So thank you so much. It's been a pleasure being here with you guys, and I hope that you have gotten a lot of golden nuggets out of this session. I look forward to our next session. So buenas tardes. Thank you, Justin.
Thank you all so much for coming out today. It was a pleasure to speak with everyone. And also, I put my email, my work email, in the chat, so feel free to reach out if you have any questions.
Bye-bye.